Looks like we're good to go. Thank you. All right, so before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. Because we do have a large number of attendees on today's call, everyone has been muted. But if you do have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to submit them all through the question window, which is in the lower right-hand corner. And my colleague Daryl Fleary, who is our own question extraordinaire, is on the line, and he'll be helping to answer those questions throughout the presentation. Also, keep in mind the session is being recorded, so in a couple of days it'll be up on our website on Lectora U, and you can always go back and review it if there's something that you missed. Okay, so today I'm going to go over the new question dialog. It is different in Lectora version 11. And we'll also discuss some new options for existing questions. We have some new ways that you can work with multiple choice and fill in the blank and drag and drop. We'll also talk about some new question types like number entry and our new rank sequence question. And then I'll show you how to submit test and survey results to Google Drive. So let's go ahead and get started. You'll probably notice that one of the biggest changes that we've made to questions is really just in how you add them. So rather than working screen by screen through a question wizard, which is what you did in version X and prior, now in version 11, all of your options to build any question are contained within one dialog, and you've got 3 tabs. So of course, all the options that are specific to your question text and choices are on the question tab. You've also can find any additional options for your question type there. So in this top area, if you can really think of the screen split into thirds. The top area, you have your question name, the variable name. You can determine the question's point value, and if you want to retain it between sessions, the variable. In the middle section is your question text, and if you want to associate an image with the question. And then the last third, the bottom third, is where you'll enter your choices. So you'll determine which ones are correct if you want to associate an image with them, and then any question choices that are specific to the question will be here as well. So a couple of other things to keep in mind. When you see this little eye icon, this represents an informational rollover, as we call it. So if we wanted to explain what randomized choices was, or you weren't quite sure, you could roll over the eye icon and it would explain that those just shuffle the question choices for you on the page. And I'll show you how that works in a little bit. Also keep in mind that you can reorder these options. So you can drag and drop the options if perhaps you didn't put them in the right order when you initially added them. You can also delete them by rolling over this minus icon, and clicking that will delete that line in the table. And when you want to add new choices, you just click to add a new choice, and you can also paste your choices in there. So if you've got all your questions written up on a Word document or somewhere else, you can copy and paste them directly into the table. So to specify feedback, you're going to go to the Feedback tab. Once you enable feedback, you can choose to either use just generic correct or incorrect feedback. That will be triggered whether or not the question's correct or incorrect. But for some questions, like multiple choice, you'll have the option to customize the individual feedback for each choice. So that option is there for you as well. You can determine also how you want to issue that feedback. So one choice is immediately. As soon as your user selects A, the correct or incorrect feedback comes up immediately. But if you select On Process Question, this is sort of the default behavior for how questions feedback is triggered. Normally this happens when you go to the next page. But you'll also see an option to add a Submit button. And what this will do is add a button to your page with an action set to process the question. So when the user selects the Submit button, the feedback is triggered. So you'll notice here that when we enabled feedback, we also had some default feedback ready to go. And we're using a display message action to say correct for correct feedback, or you answered the question incorrectly for incorrect feedback. So we've kind of done some of the work for you. If you like this feedback, great. Once you click Enable Feedback, it's just one click and you don't have to change anything. Say that you like that it's a display message with some text, but you're not crazy about the strings, about the verbiage, correct, or you answered the question incorrectly. Well, you also have the option to change that. If you go into your preferences, there's a Publish Strings tab. So I'll just show you here real quick in Lectora. If you go to the File tab and select Lectora Preferences, there's a Publish Strings option. So this, just keep in mind, this is going to affect all of your titles whenever you open them. So this is a global change to the way these default feedback text will be populated. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you'll find all of those options. So this is just a nice convenience for you. Of course, you can change the action. It doesn't need to be display message. In fact, you can change it to any action that's available in Lectora. So if you don't want just basic text feedback, you can choose a character pose and change it from thumbs up to thumbs down or happy to sad. You can play a sound or a recording. It's really up to you. The options are limitless. If you wanted to show some more advanced or complex feedback, you could run an action group and then have all of those actions triggered. So of course, the biggest change that you'll probably notice is the Attempts tab. So in version X and prior, tracking attempts and logging a question really had to be done with a bit of variables and custom work. But we've listened to our users and we've given you this option built into Lectora. So this is all done for you. So I can enter the maximum attempts allowed, and then I can optionally specify feedback that will be given when the student has reached their last attempt. At that point, the question choices will automatically be locked after the student has exhausted all of his or her attempts. So for example, let's say they've tried 2 times to answer a question and attempts are set to 2. On the second incorrect try, they're going to get this last piece of feedback here, and then the question will be locked. Okay, so let's look at an example of that. So I happen to know that the correct answer is Australia, but let's, for the sake of this exercise, say I don't know the answer. So let's answer South America. Oh, looks like I've already locked myself out of this question. Let me show you in run mode. This is what happens when you run through it too many times locally. Okay, so let's say I answer North America and click Submit. There's that default incorrect feedback. But now this is my second attempt, and remember I have attempt set to 2. I click Submit. I get that your attempts have been exhausted feedback, and now the answer choice is locked. So because I had the Retain Variables option turned on, the next time I came back into this question, it was locked again. All right, so now we've used the default feedback, but what if you want to create some more dynamic feedback? In Lectora 11, we've given you the ability to use variables in your feedback. So really just think of this as placeholders in your feedback that display text based on any variable value. So this could be the user's name if you've captured that earlier on, or any kind of previously captured input. In this case, I'm going to show you an example using the correct answer. So let's take a look at how this works. When I click Submit, I get this custom feedback. Your answer, rice, is not correct. If I were to add roles to my answer and click Submit again, the feedback updates accordingly. So let me show you how this works in Lectora. Here we are in the Feedback tab. Let's look at correct feedback. I have the action set to change contents. You can see how it works down here at the bottom. Change context of the feedback text, and for value, I've selected Set Text. When I do that, I get an edit field. If this is too small for you, select this arrow, and you're going to get our advanced text editor. So not only will it give you a bigger area to write, but this is where you'll have access to those variables. So what I like to do, just the way that I do it, is I generally type in all the static text. Your answer dash space dash is correct, because I know I'm going to want to put the variable in there. So I know that the question variable contains whatever choices that my user selected. So I'm going to go down to this variable dropdown and select question 9. When I do that, it's going to automatically place the correct formatting in there for me. So that VAR parentheses, variable name, parentheses, I don't have to remember it. I don't have to remember if I misspelled the variable or what I even named the variable or what that VAR macro was. It's all done for me. So if I select OK, let's take another look at that correct feedback. And there you go. Your answer, rice, rolls, rotel, russets, is correct. So very easy to do now in Lectora version 11. So I wanted to make sure I showed you some of the default feedback and the advanced feedback. But now let's look at some new options for each question. So let's start with multiple choice and multiple response. So as you can see, we've split these out into separate questions. So multiple choice is just if you have a single correct answer, and multiple responses is if you have multiple correct answers. So here we've given you the option to randomize the placement of choices on the page. So you saw that earlier when I was showing you the question dialog. The idea here is that every time the page is refreshed, and I could do this just by clicking F5 to refresh the page as well, the user is going to see something different. So that option in your question dialog is this Randomized Choices option. And that just shuffles the placement of those text blocks on the page. Every time the page is generated, your user will have a unique experience. So every user will see something different. This is also available for your rank sequence question. Keep in mind, one tip is if you have text like this, to make sure that all your text blocks are long enough to handle all the different text. Okay, for multiple choice, we still have the option to show choices in a drop list. So that's here for you. Again, under the choices option is where you'll find those unique options. Show choices as drop list. So this is great if you have some kind of simulation, and then you can use your feedback to trigger any kind of action. Of course, for multiple choice, you have the option to show your choices in a drop list. And again, you can find that here in the question dialog on the question tab under choices. Okay, so let's talk about fill in the blank. Notice here that I'm asking for a list of items. There's a couple of ways that we can support this now in version 11. So for the fill in the blank question, you're going to see a multi-line option, a case-sensitive option, and the ability to say if your correct answer includes all of the answers below or any of them. So in this case, I can say medium, well done, and rare. And I can evaluate my user if they answered all the questions, and I wanted to make sure that all those choices were in there. All right, so for matching, one of the most noticeable changes is you can select your line color and width. So you're not stuck with the default blue color. You can make it match your user interface. But more important than that, I want to take the time to point out a new feature that will make it easier to track and examine your test results. So let's just examine this dialog for a little bit. Over here we've got your left column items, your right column items, and then underneath are your distractors. I can put in text for a column item, for a matching item, or I can use an image or both. But then you're going to see something called this name column. So if you think back to version X, normally you would have 1-1, 2-2, as your answer. And sometimes that can be a little hard to interpret if it's put in a test result for your student or if you're examining those results later on as interactions. Not anymore in version 11. Now you have this name column. So here I've got pot to pasta, skillet to meatballs, pan to turkey. So when my test results come up, that's how it's going to look. So if you look over here on your information rollover, it's going to tell you test results equal left item name dash right item name. So if we look at the test results, how this would look for a user, you've got your answer and correct answer, and now we have some meaningful words. So I think this is a great enhancement, but keep in mind that you do have a limit when it comes to your cookies, and that's where the variable values are stored. So keep these short, but now you can at least make them meaningful. So one of my favorite changes, personally, thanks to Daryl too, is one of the changes that we've made to the drag and drop question. So this question now allows you to have either more than one correct answer for a drop zone or vice versa. So this gives you the ability to create a bucket type question. Or on the flip side, you can have a drag item that can go into multiple correct drop zones. So here in this example, non-perishable items can be dragged anywhere in that zone, and perishable items can be dragged anywhere in that zone. So let's look at the dialog for this. When you first open it up, let's just take a look and then break it down. Over here on the right, notice you've got your drop zones. We have two drop zones that are indicated with these tinted purple squares. I've named them P for perishable and P for non-perishable. Then on the left, I can add as many drag items as I want. As soon as I click to enter one, it's going to enter the text, or I can add an image. So how do you now associate them together? So let's look at baby food jars. When I select baby food jars, it's going to tell me which one I've determined is correct, which drop zone is correct. In this case, it's non-perishable. I could say that they're both correct, but in this case, it's just one. Of course, bottled water would go to non-perishable as well, so that's how you're going to get those bucket type questions. Keep in mind you can always select this magnifier. It's going to open your drop zones in a bigger window so you can resize them. And then we've got a couple more options. You can choose to snap the drag items right into the center of the drop zone. So where you saw the example before, I could kind of put them anywhere. This would snap them right into the center. You can choose to show the outlines of the drop zones and then determine what color those will be. So here's another sample of how that looks. So this is more informational. In this case, we're not evaluating our learner. We're just using the drag and drop question to create a really interesting exercise to teach them more about cookware. So in this case, it's just one drop zone. We're dragging it in. We're using some feedback to show the text in the button. That's all there is to it. We're also going to have better test results here. So let's go back into this dialog. Notice that there is an item name and a drop zone name. This is what's going to get used in your test results, just like matching questions. So let's take a look here. Your answer, baby food jars dash NP, and that stands for non-perishable. For me, that's meaningful. So just remember to keep them short, but now you have the option to make them mean something to you and to your learners. All right, let's move on to the hotspot question. The hotspot question now includes a transparent area as a style rather than just those radio buttons or check boxes that were available. So if we open up the dialog for hotspot questions, we have transparent area, and I can choose to determine my outline color so it matches my course. So this really doesn't give away those answers right away. The user really has to think about what could possibly be the correct answer before they choose something. We have a new question called number entry. So this is similar to a fill-in-the-blank question, but the idea here is that it's letting you evaluate numerical answers. So you could set a specific number or a range of numbers. So let's take a look at the question dialog here for the number entry question. So down here I can determine what the relationship is. Does it have to be specifically equal to a value? In this case, we've said between including, which means it can be between 12 and 13, and it could be 12 or 13 as a correct answer. So there's a number of options here for you to really make sure you're evaluating a specific set of numbers or a specific value. So here I can enter 12, that's going to be correct, 12.5, correct, and 13 would be correct as well. So we've just given them a little bit of leeway because this question's really hard and I certainly wouldn't have known the answer if I didn't have access to the answer. All right, and the next new question that we have is the ranks like sequence question. This was previously known as an ordinal question, but now we've made it a gradable question. So this is wonderful for ranking a set of options in a specific order, or when you need to ask a learner how to sequence a set of steps involved in a process. So here we can answer this in a specific order. And if we look at the dialog and the options and how this works, I just determined the correct order. I still have the option to randomize choices or show them in a drop list, which is what we've done here. So those are just some of the changes, or really most of the changes that have been made to the specific questions in version 11. So hopefully this has inspired you to use them in some new ways. But now let's move on to our new feature to submit a test or survey or a form to Google Drive. So we're going to go through the steps together, and you may have not noticed, but all of the questions as we were going through them just now have actually all been contained within a test. So we're going to submit it and then we'll look at it together. Then I'm going to move on to survey questions and talk about it for a little bit, and then we'll go through the process together of setting up that survey and submitting it. So the first step to submitting a test or survey to Google Drive is to either use our Lectora template, which we have available for you, or build your own Google Drive form. So you could build your own form, but honestly, we already have the templates available for you up on Google Drive, public for you to search for and view. My recommendation is to go ahead and use them. It just cuts down a step and makes life just a little bit easier. So in Google Drive, these used to be available by selecting Create New from Google Drive, and there was an option to add those templates. But for some reason, they've taken that away in their latest update. So I have just a link that'll take you straight to those Google Docs template gallery. I'm going to paste that in the chat window for everybody to have. You can go ahead and bookmark it just like I have. So when you go to Google Docs template gallery, you can just search for Lectora, and you'll see a couple of options that are available to you. You have the option just for a typical Lectora test survey submission. And the difference here between this one and the anonymous is that this has a name field that will record the user's name if you have in Lectora that prompt for name option selected. If you want to have the option to submit, let your users submit tests or surveys anonymously, we have a template for that as well. And then we have a template for form submission. So all I'm going to do here is select Use this template. When I do that, I want to show you something specific. When I select Use this template, I'm just creating a copy of the template into my own Google Drive. Let me open up Google Drive. And you'll see I have copy of Lectora test survey submission. So all it does is when I select Use this template, here's the template, and now it belongs to me. So I can change it if I need to. So let's notice a few things about this form. First of all, keep in mind no one's ever going to see the form. It's just a vehicle for Lectora to submit those question results into a spreadsheet. Second, notice they're all text entry questions. So that's, if you're going to create your own form, all you need is to build a large number of text entry questions. You need as many these are just placeholders, and you need as many placeholders as you have questions or variables you want to submit. So in this case, we want to select the name, and always at the end of all of the questions, we're always going to post the score. So you really don't need to delete the columns or delete the questions. You don't need to even touch the form the way it is. You can just select Use this template and close this down, and you're good to go. But I want to show you that with every form in Google Drive comes a spreadsheet. So when I select this, I don't see the form. I see the spreadsheet that's built along with it. If I need to get back to the form, I click Form from the drop-down and select Edit Form. So for every question or item in the form, I have a corresponding column. All right, so here's the part where we're going to take the URL and we're going to paste it. So all we do is take this address here from the form, Control-C to copy. And that's the next step. Once we've copied the URL from the form, that's when we're going to put it back into Lectora. So we'll go to the Settings dialog for the test. So here's Test Properties. We're going to go to the Results tab